Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. So, tonight I'm going to be talking about communication and connection. I've talked about this topic a handful of times over the years in this broadcast, but today I want to share with you what I would consider an evolution in my thinking about this. As I went back and looked at previous generations of this broadcast, I see that it was in there, the evolution, the place that I'm at it, that I'm where I'm at with it today was in that in the beginning. So I just want to expand on that and talk about it in slightly a different way and talk about it from a bigger perspective than just the skill itself. Before I get into tonight's content, I just want to talk about our upcoming Finding You programs. Our next Finding You workshop, which is my number one recommendation. It's not just that I run the program and own the program, but it's also that this is what I believe is the most effective thing that I can do for the world, is to provide these intensives. April 23rd through 27th, a 4.5-day immersive experience with 6 other participants. In my estimation, this is 6 months to a year's worth of therapy in 4.5 days. We have an online option, which is about half the time and about a third of the cost. May 16th through 18th is that offering online. And then June 4th through 8th is the next offering after that. I'm going to be hosting the Conscious Parenting Workshop in person. That's an all-day workshop for parents in the Bay Area, May 10th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And then I'm going to be doing the same thing online just over a week later, May 19th at 9 a.m. to 4 Mountain Time, 9 a.m. to 4 Mountain Time. The Finding Connection Workshop is basically our Finding You program for couples. So often we get asked by couples if they can attend together. This is that opportunity. So June 18th through 22, that's the Finding You workshop for couples. This will be hosted by myself and my wife, Michelle. And we have private intensive. We have intensives for couples, for families, for individuals that are private and customized. For any and all inquiries, contact us by emailing us at info@findingyouprograms.com. That's info@findingyouprograms.com. In addition to all of this, I'm going to be hosting a 5-day workshop in New York this fall, October 12th through 17th, The Audacity to Be You, with my daughter, Emma. So this is one of those opportunities where you have our 2 lead therapists that are going to be co-presenting, co-facilitating a workshop. That's going to be at the Omega Institute. So if you want to find out more about that, go to the Omega Institute's website. That's www.eomega.org. www.eomega.org. You can find out more and register there. Also, one new announcement that we're excited about coming soon is going to be the Finding You Inner Circle. That's going to be a subscription-based offering, also support of for the Finding You podcast for this broadcast. That means for the inner circle subscribers, you will have access to the live broadcast and to private episodes that will only be for you, 1 to 2 per month. Finding You alumni will continue to be automatically enrolled in this program. If you're interested in this is coming out soon. Just email us again at info@findingyouprograms.com. That is info@findingyouprograms.com. All right. With that, like I said, I want to talk about the evolution, my own evolution when it comes to communication theory. I used to say years ago that when I was younger and being presented with a communication skills training, I thought this was for therapists that were maybe more concrete, maybe less interested in the insight or the deeper ideas in psychology. But really what I really discovered is that the skills that we teach around communication skills are often the way that somebody would sound if they were self-aware, if they were more enlightened and psychologically mature. So in that way, I used to talk about it being something that I go back to, something that after all the years of training, I realized is a really important fundamental set of concepts and ideas of skills that can help you gain greater awareness. Sometimes when I talk about this, when I'm coaching somebody about broaching a difficult topic with a partner, one of the pieces of advice that I often give is to consider giving the feedback, stating the difficult thing that you want to say when the iron is cold. I think everybody's familiar with that old adage, strike while the iron is hot, but this is strike while the iron is cold. Strike when talk about this, broach the subject, when your nervous system is regulated, when you're feeling calm, when the other person seems calm. The problem with that idea for people is that if they're not in conflict, they don't want to take the risk of being in conflict, so they won't bring up the difficult thing. Or if you're on the receiving end of that, you might have that experience with everything was going well, and now you're bringing up something difficult, something challenging, something critical. Having said all of that, I do think it can be really beneficial to present information not in the heat of the moment, because that's not going to be your best moment when you're going to have access to all of your rational thinking, all of your planning, all of your creativity. But at the same time, it's really important to understand that this ask for intimacy is really, really difficult. I talk about this all the time, that we think of intimacy as this warm and fuzzy kind of healing experience or feeling, but it's terrifying. It's difficult. We have to say really hard things. We have to ask really difficult questions. We have to listen to really hard things and answer really difficult questions. So intimacy is a risk. If we are to seek connection, we are to take a risk, because the risk that we are taking is that the things that have happened to us in the past when we made this effort will happen again. One of my favorite precursors to talking about communication, especially if you're giving feedback or broaching a difficult subject with a partner, with somebody, with a friend, is to front load it with the idea that you're doing this because it's important to you. You're trying to make a connection. That you could instead just ignore it, sweep it under the carpet, repress it, but that's going to lead to greater disconnection. I talk about this idea, it's not my idea, but I talk about this idea often, that boundaries or expressing difficult things are not walls that we put up. We're not pushing people away, but we're showing people how and where to connect to us. We're sharing things that we're afraid are going to be met with defensiveness. And defensiveness is the real barrier to connection. Defensiveness is the defense against being bad, right? The need to be good, to be the good one, to not do anything wrong, to not have any bad intents, hurtful, harmful intents. And so in communication and relationships, I talk about this in families and marriage all the time. The difficulty, the mistake is not the problem. The misstep is not the problem. It is the defense that creates the trauma or the problem in a relationship or in a partnership. That need to be good. So that's where the deeper work comes into play. I have to be comfortable with who I am. I have to know myself. I have to see parts of myself that I've been taught to not love, to not like, to not want. Recently, a friend said to me when I shared a fear of something, and this friend was somebody who had listened to my work quite a bit, said to me, well, stopped me and said, but wait, shouldn't you not feel that way? And my response was, I don't really know what that means, that I shouldn't feel that way. I don't really have that option available to me right now. The only options I have are to feel it, to deal with it, or to pretend that I don't have it. To internalize that should that you've just stated, or that the world has stated, in so much that I don't feel, or I deny that I feel what I'm feeling. So showing up and telling the truth is difficult about ourselves. I've had to come to terms with, in my own recovery, my own mental health journey, I've had to come to terms with that my default is to lie. I want to avoid conflict. I want to please people. I want people to love me, to think I'm worthy of connection, that I'm worthy of love. And I can trace that back very, very easily and clearly to my own childhood experiences. So my instinct is to tell you what you want to hear. I don't think about myself as a liar in terms of my ethics and business. But if it's interpersonal, that's my instinct. That's my go-to. And I say that to you, not as an abdication of my responsibility in life, but as an awareness that I have to keep that, like all of my mental health deficits or challenges or limitations, I have to keep it right in front of me. Often when I'm talking to my clients in therapy, what I'm saying to them is, don't worry about, or even conceptualize it in terms of getting better. But think about it as becoming more authentic, more authentically you. And whether you have an addiction, codependency, narcissism, which we all have, borderline thinking, which we all have some of, depression, anxiety, which we all have some of, right? It doesn't matter what you have. It's just important to keep that in front of you, because if you don't keep that in front of you, it's likely to sneak up behind you and sabotage everything that you're hoping for. This is why people that are in recovery, haven't had a drink for 30 years, walk into meetings sometimes on a daily basis and announce to the group, "Hi, my name is Joe, or my name is Susie. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I'm a codependent." Not because they're hung up on labels, not because they're thinking people can't grow or evolve, but it is a confession of sorts to say, this is under stress what I go to. When I can't make sense of the world, when I can't deal with ambiguity or paradox or the mystery that is life. When I'm dealing with financial stress or relationship stress or somebody that I care about is hurting. My go-to way of self-medicating is this style, is this preference. And I keep that in front of me. I think tonight, maybe the most important headline for me to share with you is to remind you of the fact that there are two fundamental tasks in connection, in intimacy. We talk a lot about, I say this all the time, that one of these tasks gets all the press all the time. People talk about telling the truth and being vulnerable. And that is an important part of the equation of intimacy, of connection. But maybe more nuanced and magical and powerful is the second skill that is required, which is the ability to contain, to hold space for somebody, to not correct, to not teach, to not tell them how they should feel or think. And you're not just holding elegant communication. This is important tonight. When I talk about this idea of holding space or containing is the analytical term. When I talk about holding space or containing, I'm not talking about holding this neat little package. I'm talking about holding a mess. I've told the story on many occasions of a client that I was working with who had experienced a disconnection from somebody that was really important to them for many years in their life. And in an attempt at an important life stage, an important moment in life, they reached out to their friend again and said, I don't know what it was that I did. I can only guess that you're angry or hurt at something. And if you're willing to share it with me, I'm willing to listen. The person decided to respond back to their friend, their estranged friend. And they listed off the things that they had been hurt by, the things that they felt resentful for or angry about. All of this happened in between sessions. And by the time I had my next session with my client, he shared with me his response, which was largely dismissive, correcting, challenging the inaccuracies in the story that their estranged friend had shared with them at this request. And they looked at me and they said, "What do you think about my response?" I can't remember if they had sent it or not yet. But they asked me the question, "What do you think about my response?" And I said, "Well, it's not containing," which may not be your intention. Maybe you don't have the energy, given what's going on in your life right now. Maybe you don't have the energy to hold space and contain this person. And reflexively, they said back to me, "Well, I would have contained them if they weren't acting like such a spoiled brat, an immature child. If they had been reasonable." And then, of course, I responded to my client and said, if they had been reasonable, it's not called containing. See, I think we put the onus too much in communication skills training on the speaker. I don't think we realize the weight that rests on the shoulders of the person being asked to hold space, to contain, to listen without judgment, without emotional upheaval or fear or disgust or dismissal, just to be present with the person. When I'm running group therapy, I'll often see the group look at me out of the side, my side, right? So from in my periphery, waiting for me to interrupt somebody saying something, sharing something, talking. Maybe they're talking too long. Maybe some of the things that they're sharing seem ill-advised to some of the group members. And what I've learned over the years is this person needs to be heard. They need to be understood. I'm going to hold space. I teach people on the first day of our Finding You intensives that one of the things you're going to be practicing here, in fact, technically, you're going to be practicing this more than telling your story, just based on the numbers, that you're one of 7. The skill that you're going to be practicing is learning how to be a safe container, a safe listener. And that is a gift. Remember, I talk about this in the Audacity to Be You. In speaking about intimacy, speaking about attempts at connection or sharing or resolving conflict, the talker tends to be taking. And the listener tends to be the giving person, the giving party. And that is obvious. It's actually common sense. Because if you're sharing something, a truth, a feeling, you're asking to be listened to. You're asking to be heard. And that requires capacity, psychic energy, a groundedness, a calmness. That requires the person listening to be responsible for their own nervous system regulation. The person talking is often energized. The person listening sometimes can just do nothing besides just keeping their mouth quiet. And I'll talk about that a little bit later tonight. Oftentimes at the end of a difficult exchange of words and ideas of feelings, the person who just spoke feels closer. You've seen this in your partnership, in your marriage. You've seen this. The person sharing the difficult truth feels closer, feels liberated, feels more alive. They have kind of fanned the flame of their psychic energy, their eros energy. The person listening or containing feels distant, might feel a little bit hurt. They feel pushed back by the sharing, criticized, shamed, guilted for it. And it's always confusing in couples. Because even though the person did a good job listening, they may not be open to soft, warm, sensitive intimacy immediately after such an exchange. So it's important to understand what's going on. That listening is an essential part of the equation and takes great capacity, great skill. And it is underrepresented when we talk about intimacy and sharing and finding one's truth and finding connection. I want to talk about the fact that there are 2 important goals or objectives inherent in healthy communication skills. One is the obvious one, interpersonal connection, right? Intimacy, connection to others. Sometimes when someone comes to me and they want some coaching around how to talk to a partner about a difficult thing, I tell them about the front-loading thing that I shared with you already, about prefacing what you say with the statement that you're attempting to find connection and closeness with the other person. I'll talk about, talking in terms of I feel. This is what came up for me. And I might even add, if you say it this way, it's less likely to provoke a defense in the other person. But I've learned over the years that term less likely is fairly insignificant. Because in couples, you can give a perfectly good I feel statement. And there's a strong likelihood that your partner is going to feel criticized, blamed. You didn't say you didn't give a you message. You gave a perfect I message, but all they can hear is you. Because of our defense, because of our egos, because of our lack of a sense of self, because we don't know ourselves. Because of that energy, that we were raised in and with, that we needed to be good. Instead of course, the opposite of that energy is being raised to be a human, accepting and compassionate toward ours and others' flaws, fallibilities, humanness. So the first objective implicit in communication skills training is interpersonal connection. The second one, which in my book is the more important one, is intrapsychic connection. That is understanding what we're feeling, being able to connect our observations of the outside world, the stimulus around us, what somebody does or says, what happens to us, our beliefs, our thoughts, our interpretations of those events, our feelings that arise out of those interpretations, and then our desires to move forward. That is why I like teaching the communication skills training tools. It's because I'm giving people a tool for greater self-awareness. I want you to think the I feel statement more than I want you to say it. Again, I don't put a lot of weight on it preventing the kind of conflict that comes during a difficult exchange of emotions, of feelings. But I do put a lot of weight on the fact that if you think and understand the principles, and I'll talk about those tonight, you'll have a better way of understanding yourself. And lastly, I just want to say this. Maybe the spirit of tonight is I don't want the skills to eclipse the connection, the spirit of this. I said to my wife just recently when we were having a discussion, I said, when we were younger, we used to get really caught up on the skills. We're both therapists, both trained. Every therapist is trained in communication skills model at one point in time. And they're fairly similar. But I said to her, when we were younger, this is how we thought it was done. And it's important. You know, that is part of who we are, who we become. But at this point, the more valuable resource that each of us have is our ability to hear the un-I feel statement, to hear somebody's dysregulated sharing as the unspoken I feel statement. Again, containing isn't containing if the person presents it to you nicely packaged and rational and fully accountable for their part. Doesn't hurt, of course, to have those things. But the real meat of connection is the ability of, as Heinz Kohut says, for one person to go crazy at a time. In my book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, the chapter epigraph says, communication skills help us connect to our children and ourselves. As we become more clear about the relationship between the events in our lives, our thoughts and our feelings, we'll be better able to see our children and provide them with a safe context in which to work through their difficulties. I've shared this story a handful of times, and it's been years since I've talked about it at length. I think I talked about it a couple of months ago. My professor, my favorite professor, was always late to her class in graduate school during my doctoral program. And I loved her class. I loved listening to her. I look forward to it all week. It was a 3-hour class on Monday nights. And she was, I'm not sure that she was on time one time. We would just have to deal with how late she was going to be. And one particular night, there was a handful of us in this small class, and we were getting upset, agitated, feeling resentful. And I was unofficially elected. I probably volunteered. Unofficially elected to be the spokesperson when the professor finally arrived. And I said to her, using the skills, the tools, you know, it's frustrating, it's hard, it's hurtful to wait for you each week. I said it assertively and clearly. And she said to me in the warm, compassionate voice that was hers, that she always used, she looked at me and she said, I bet it is frustrating. And I remember a light went on. I thought, it's mine. It's ours. It's our feeling. It's my feeling. Implicit in her containing was, I can complain to the dean, I can drop the class, I can become passive aggressive, I can lash out at her and deal with the consequences, be passive aggressive, sarcastic. I could do any number of things, but it was my feeling to deal with. I could have lodged a formal complaint to the university, and nothing she said suggested that otherwise, but it was mine to deal with. Further in the chapter, in the journey of the heroic parent, I wrote, more important than the skills themselves are how we hold the other person, the child, in the case of the book, in our minds. Or to put it another way, what we think about the other person is more important than what we say to them. Once we regard the other with love and without judgment, our skills, particularly our communication skills, can provide clarity and connection. When we nest our communication skills in love, positive regard, and authenticity, our ability to communicate honestly and clearly will follow. A very simple way to understand the impact of how we hold our children in our minds is this. How we think about our children is how they will think about themselves. Emma Reedy, my daughter, Emma Reedy June, says this all the time. She says, I don't place a lot of emphasis on communication skills training, although I do that with my therapy clients. But the fact of the matter is, what is really being exchanged between two people is energy. So when I give, for example, the list that's from the Audacity to Be You, the list of safe versus unsafe communication, right on the safe side, I have phrases like, thank you for telling me. I'm so glad you're talking about it. I hear you. I'm sorry. I get it. I feel similarly, right? I have all of those validating statements on the left column under the safe heading. And under the unsafe side, I have various dismissive things like, you're being too sensitive. Get over it. You're overreacting. That's not what happened. Ignore them. They're just jealous. That's just your depression, your anxiety speaking. When I give those lists to people, I'm trying to communicate an energetic response. And people, it's hard for people to see that. They take it literally. They want the skill. They want to know what to say. But when I give them what to say, they're frustrated because it doesn't communicate the feeling that they have. And so really this is about our own growth as reflected in the dyad, in the relationship, in the exchange of energy, of communication. And the I feel statement is a template for owning our own feelings, being responsible for our own interpretations, beliefs in the world. It's not that we chose all of them. I teach this all the time. If I came to you and said, hey, when you touched me on the shoulder just now, and I flinched, it was because I'd been mistreated by my father physically growing up. So I'm kind of always on guard. And of course, if you care about me and I'm not asking for something outside of your value system, you're going to respond to that and say, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to touch without asking. I'll ask next time. Thanks for sharing, right? The exchange of the I feel statement is to make the unconscious conscious, to make the implicit explicit, to set the project up clearly in the relationship. But if we use sharing of feelings, sharing of our I feel statements, if we use that to change people, to guilt them, to demand that they meet our needs, it's the equivalent of taking a hammer and hitting somebody over the head with it. A hammer is a wonderful tool, but it can also be misused. From the book Nonviolent Communication, which is sort of the gold standard in communication theory, we read, we are dangerous when we are not conscious of our responsibility for how we behave, think, and feel. Right? That's our task. That's our psychic task, is to become responsible for our own serenity. We use the I feel statement as a symbol of I'm responsible for my serenity. And I will share with the people who want to be in my life how I'm feeling at a given moment for connection, maybe even for the possibility of feedback, like in the example I gave about touching somebody. But ultimately, if I use my communication skills to beat people over the head, to control them, to manipulate them, to get them to meet my needs through guilt or shame, it's no different than if I just yelled at them. In fact, yelling at them might have been a greater gift. It reminds me when children are taken to the emergency room and the nurses have a sense that the child is being abused. They say amongst themselves, we pray for bruises. We pray for bruises. And the reason that they pray for bruises is because those can be documented. Those can be reported. So the skill is a hint. It's a shadow. It's a marker of the deeper psychological work involved in connection. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you think that life is doing it to you, right? You're being done to. If you don't know you have an anger problem, if you don't know you have trauma, like I've said recently to you all on this broadcast, an awareness, another thing that I put before me is that I live in fear. Now, I manage my fear at a high level. In fact, fear for me often drives excellence and achievement in my life. I owe a lot of my success to my fear, so I can manage it well. For some people, and in some situations, even for me, it can deteriorate performance, behavior, and so forth. But when I owned that I had been afraid my whole life, when I owned in 2010 that largely I had been a liar my entire life, I'm making the unconscious conscious. And if I don't do that, I will see enemies and devils everywhere. I will see villains and monsters everywhere. But if I can own and take responsibility and do the work that I need to do to heal this thing that is me, which is a lifelong process without a finish line, I will come to realize the other idea that Jung so wonderfully pointed out, which is the only devils that we need to worry about are the ones running around inside of our own heads. So the I feel statement becomes a tool that helps us prevent projecting out into the world the responsibility for our happiness and our serenity. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, said, to love without knowing how to love wounds the person that we love. In a large sense, doing the work that it takes to learn how to listen deeply to others is another way of talking about love. Understanding, Thich Nhat Hanh said, is love's other name. But we get so caught up in who's right and the accuracy of the objective pieces of the story that's being told to us that we miss the spirit of it. And we stand self-righteously on our perch and say, I don't do that all the time. That's not what I said last night. That's not what I did yesterday. We do that because that's the defense. We don't want to be the bad one. We need to be good. And that is the number one dragon that we face in our lives. Some other things to remember when thinking about communication skills training is it's simple, but it's difficult. It's difficult to take responsibility for yourself. It's difficult to contain people. One thing my therapist said to me is, you can tell a narcissist by a few things, but one of them is they can't listen. They can never be wrong or bad. They're horrible at containing. They don't ask questions. Right? The narcissistic wound is the wound of not being good enough, of believing that the only value that I would have to offer anybody in this world is my goodness, I'm not worthy of connection unless I'm good. And that comes from not having an adequate container in childhood, not being seen. But we've been taught if we don't correct people, if we don't correct our children, if we just listen to their rage and their anger and their hurt, their exaggerations, we're not guiding them to where they need to go. And that's just not the way that it works. I understand that thinking because I've had it and sometimes fall into it even today. But the fact of the matter is when somebody gets seen, they become more accountable. When somebody gets seen, they see both sides of things. I talk about this story in the Journey of the Heroic Parent. As I was finishing it, some last edits, I added a story. I was in Los Angeles. My wife and youngest were out doing things during the day. I was writing, and at night we would do some things together. And one morning they were getting ready to go. My wife was busy, and my young child at the time, who I think she was probably 7 or 8 at the time, I'm not sure. She said to me, "I wish that my brothers and sisters were dead." She has 3 older siblings. She says if they were, we could just do this all the time, just the 3 of us. And because I was writing my book, I was ready for it. And I said, wouldn't that be amazing if you didn't have to share your parents with anybody else? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could do this all the time? And my young child said automatically, but they are my best friends, and I would miss them. Do you see how automatically you've seen that in your relationship? You've seen that in your marriage. But holding takes great capacity, psychologically speaking. It takes a strong base of self. Remember, if you know yourself and somebody accuses you of being a helicopter, you know that that's not true. So you just get curious about what's going on for them. If somebody says something about you that's not true, there's no reason to defend it. And if somebody says something that is true, there's no reason to defend it, logically speaking, of course. But because we were taught that the goal of life, the goal of being a human was to be good, we miss it all. Communication skills might look simple, but they are deep and rich in our psychology. And I will coach people. I always wanted our students in our residential program, I always wanted them to learn the I feel statement and the reflective listening, not because I believe that they would use that for the rest of their lives, because none of them ever did, virtually, but because I wanted them to understand the psychological responsibility that was embedded in those skills. It's deeper than you imagine. Our ability to listen and hold space for somebody goes back to our histories, goes back to our development. All of this can be affected by the mood that we are in, how much sleep we got the night before, how stressed we are in various aspects of our life, how safe we're feeling, right? But in large part, the success of a difficult exchange of communication between two people is going to rest on the listener and their ability to hold space, to be large enough. That's what it means. It means being large enough, being bigger, being more expansive, being the adult in that moment, even if I'm talking about a conversation between two adults. I like it because it interrupts old patterns, automatic responses, especially the listening piece. Well, a lot of people think it's too simple, it's beneath them. And I understand that too, because that was my initial impression of these skills. But of course, as I've explored the depth psychology, the analytic psychology that I've studied, the mythology that I've studied, I see that communication skills has its roots in deep ideas and deep principles. Like I said, just think it. Think the I feel statement. Sometimes I think it while I'm sitting alone. Often I do. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I believe about the situation. This is what happened to me. Right? I see the relationship between those three aspects of myself. What can I do with that? What do I want to do? What's in my control? What's out of my control? You see, just going through that exercise without any exchange of words with anybody else gives me the ability to make choice, to make conscious choice out of these things. More so than I ever would if everything is just responding, everything is just happening inside of me invisibly. One of the things that they find about prisoners who've committed violent crimes is that they see no separation between stimulus and response. It's one of the things that they try to change or teach or introduce to prisoners who have been convicted of violent offenses. They try to get them to pause and to talk about their feelings. When I worked with sex offenders for the state of Utah 28 years ago, we would teach the I feel statements because we wanted to get them to see their feelings, their beliefs, what has happened to them, right? These were the tools. I ask you how you feel so you can talk about your feelings and not merely act out of them. I'm taking it up from the bottom part of the brain, the primitive, the reptilian part of our brain, to the top part, to the front and top part of our brains, so that you have agency. You don't become this bundle of nerves that is having knee-jerk responses to the world. So in a lot of ways, it's like practicing a skill in sports. When I was a teenager, I read the book, The Inner Game of Tennis. And they talk about that you learn the skills, you learn the approach, you learn the stroke, the grip. But you can't think about that stuff during a match. If you have to think about that stuff during a match, you're beat. You practice it so that it becomes second nature. You practice it and then you forget it. And lastly, remember most of all, don't use your I feel statement as a principal tool or objective to get people to change. I'm often asked the question, what is the most common mistake that parents make? Not the worst mistake, but the most common mistake that parents make. Maybe it should be that people make. And my answer is, if not the chief, the most common mistake, it's among those, is that people share feelings to get other people to feel responsible for their feelings. I am hurt. You hurt me. It's your responsibility. You have to do something. I tell my child that their drug usage is scaring me. And the implication is, stop doing drugs so that I won't be scared. I tell my wife that my feelings are hurt. Stop doing the thing so that, you see? Sometimes just asking, sometimes if somebody gives an I feel statement or a feeling statement twice in the same conversation. If it's my conversation, I'll often ask the other person, what's the goal here? What do you want me to do with that? If I've listened, what do you want me to do with that? Because what I'm trying to bring to the surface is, are you trying to get me to change? Are you implying that I'm responsible for your feelings? Because that's a slippery slope. The way I understand this life is, if other people are responsible for our feelings, then other people are the solutions, and we are screwed. But if we are responsible for our serenity or lack of it, that is great news, because that means we can do something about it. More important than what you say or how you say it is why you say it. To be clear, communication is not a tool for changing the behavior of others. Again, the goal is not to change the other to make ourselves feel better. If we do that, we are implicitly telling our children or our partners that it is their job to make others happy. And this thinking predisposes them to lose themselves. Can also create vulnerability to peer pressure. Rather, we use healthy communication skills as a way of allowing two people to be fully present in their relationship. When I teach parents or partners not to use their feelings and their words to try to guilt the other person, into behavior change, I am often misinterpreted as saying, don't tell the other person, don't tell your child or your partner how you feel. Far from it. My point is, we tell our children how we feel so we can be present with them and more intentional in our response to them. I've had this little thought experiment or this little thing I've noticed over the years as I've done parent coaching, where I talk about the fact that children aren't built to contain us. It doesn't work that way. They have, ideally, they have fewer resources than we do. Hopefully, because of our age and our experience, we have garnered and gathered greater resources. That's what allow us to contain other people, right? We take in the child, what they're feeling, what's going on for them, what they're sharing, even if it's said in a very messy way. We metabolize what they say with the greater resources that are available to us, and we reflect back out to the child that they are okay. Like I did with my daughter, snuggling that one morning before I was finishing my book. So we begin to ask ourselves, why are we sharing our feelings? Is my goal to change the other person, to guilt the other person, to manipulate the person into believing that they are responsible, that they need to change their behavior in the way that I am suggesting so that I don't have the feelings that I have? Or are we sharing to be present and ultimately to take ownership? I feel is not about I chose to feel. If you touch me on the shoulder, if I'd been physically abused by my father and you touch me on the shoulder, I'm not choosing to feel scared when I flinch. It's not a conscious thought, but it's mine. It is my thought. It started with my father's abuse in this story. By the way, I have not been abused by my father. I'm just saying that as an example. Not have been abused physically, at least. It might have happened to me, but it from somebody else, but it's mine now. It's my responsibility. And the audacity to be you, and I've talked about this in other places. I talk about the 8 tools for connection. But I'm talking about connection to yourself as well as to others. Because connection to self, that's the first step in connection to others. If you're not connected to yourself, if you don't know what you feel and think and believe, you haven't differentiated those aspects inside of yourself, you're just this conglomeration of impulses, instinctive reflexes. Connection is virtually impossible. So you connect to yourself. You know thyself first. And from that base, you create the possibility of a connection to others. I talk about I feel statements for the 8 tools: reflective listening, deep listening, asking the other person what's their intention in sharing, what do they want from you? Do you want me to problem solve? Do you want me to make a suggestion? You might say to your child or your partner. Do you want me to just listen? Are you asking for accountability? What's the goal? Or if you are the sender, the talker in this place, stating your intention. I just want to tell you how I feel. And what's funny about that, I have said this to professional therapists in my life. I've said, I just want to tell you how I feel. I don't need you to do anything. And it goes without saying, I'm going to say it in an appropriate way. I just need you to listen. Can you do that? And then I share, and it is so common for them not to be able to listen because it pricks their ego. That part of them, that energy in them that needs to be good. They can't tolerate it. They can't contain it. Avoiding imperatives like have to, need to, should, ought to. When I say that I don't use the word should, it's because I don't know what it means. You shouldn't feel scared. You shouldn't feel angry. You shouldn't be codependent. You shouldn't be addicted. I don't know what should means. Does that mean God doesn't want me to? You don't want me to? The government doesn't want me to? I don't know what you mean. I don't have that option available. I don't know what to do with that. So avoiding those imperatives, those shoulds, those ought tos, good, bad, right, wrong. Avoiding polarizing language. A study was done years ago on families that deemed themselves successful 2 years post-treatment. And one of the questions that was asked of them is, what tools and skills did you gain from your treatment experience that you're still using today? And one of them was this one, number 5, avoiding polarizations, all or nothing. You always, you never. Avoiding advice giving. I don't like advice. I don't like to give it. I don't like to receive it. It's not important. It's not important for teaching. It's not important for therapy. I replace it with phrases like, you might try, you could try. One thing that has worked for me is, in similar situations, I've tried this, right? But advice is to impose oneself, to assume that one knows what someone else should do. And we don't know other people's truth. You don't know what other people's journeys needs to be for them. It helps us develop greater compassion for ourselves and others. And that, as I've talked about lately, is maybe the most important first ingredient. The most important first ingredient in self-awareness is self-compassion. And from self-compassion springs our compassion towards others. And then, of course, recognizing our own nervous system dysregulation and taking time when we need it. So the I feel statement, the stages are: I feel, sharing an emotion. This is what I feel. When, and then you give an event. Now, in reality, it all goes in a different order. In reality, you come into a situation with certain beliefs, certain interpretations of certain behaviors. Then the event occurs, and then you have an emotion as a result. If somebody closes the door while I'm talking and I interpret that because of my own background and beliefs, the system, that they don't love me, that they don't care about what I have to say, the belief I carry around with me because of my own background, my own trauma maybe, the door closing happens second, and then the feeling comes third. But we start off with I feel in the I feel statement to emphasize ownership. This is my responsibility. This is what comes up for me. And we separate out I feel with our interpretation, because the door slam to me might mean something differently to you. I feel this way when you close the door. I feel this way because I think that means you don't care about me. And then if everybody was regulated, the other person would say, oh, so for you, door closing during a conversation is I don't care about you. Wow, I can really understand that, why that would feel so upsetting to you. And that's how it would happen if we were all regulated. But we're not usually regulated in these situations, so it doesn't go that way. But this practice, this way of thinking, this way of looking at ourselves and others can develop a pattern that leads to greater awareness. And then, of course, being able to recognize what we can control and what we can't control. What I'd like to do for myself that I can control is this. What I would request of you is this. I remember 2 things. Number 1, when we were first coming up with our version of the I feel statement 25 plus years ago, one of the team members suggested that we didn't include the request or the hope for others, what is outside of our control. And I said, not stating it doesn't make it go away. Not stating it doesn't make it less powerful in this dynamic. Stating it takes away its charge, takes away its manipulative aspect. It's just stating it. What I would like for you to do is not come late anymore, or call if you're going to be late, or not close the door when we're talking. You don't have to do it, but that's my request, right? Remember, a characterological disorder is defined in one way by demanding that our needs be met versus requesting that they be met. So we talk about this idea of what we can control and what we can't control as the conclusion of our accountability, our own responsibility for this journey, and making it clear. The funny thing about it is, for years, I would teach this in a parenting class. Hundreds of classes I taught this skill set in. And when I was asking parents to talk about their children, for example, let's say pot smoking, very common concern or complaint for parents that I've worked with. When I asked them to come up with something that was within their control, they couldn't even imagine it so often. Very often, they couldn't imagine it. And I thought that was profoundly important. If you can't imagine a hope or a desire that's within your control when exchanging communication, I would suggest that you take some time to reflect on that. What can you do if you have a partner that's calling you names? What can you do if you have a child who's smoking marijuana against your wishes and your value system? What can you do? And the fact that parents so often, at a really high clip, like 80 or 90% of the time, couldn't come up with something that they could own in the equation, something they could be responsible for in the equation, it let me know that that's the level of awareness and maturity that most people are operating at. They believe that the problem is out there, the feeling and the issue is out there. The devil is out there. And of course, reflective listening is deep listening. So what you're saying is, can you help me with what you said so I understand it? Did I get it right? Is there anything else? From the audacity to be you, I wrote, to understand somebody, to truly hear someone, sometimes you have to lose your mind. That's the kind of capacity that I'm talking about. You have to suspend temporarily your own reactions, your own defense, your own opinion, your own ideas. Put it on a shelf temporarily, not forever, not to never be expressed or explored, but temporarily put it on the shelf so that you can be there for the other person. The problem with listening is that if we have to set aside what we're feeling and thinking and our own reactions, our own interpretation, that will feel a lot like, for many of us, the kind of trauma that we felt in childhood, which was we weren't seen, that our feelings didn't matter. So you see, even in the reflective listening skill, we have an opportunity to see our trauma. If you can't listen, get outside of your own paradigm and listen from their perspective. If you can't do that, you're most likely responding in what we call a trauma response, right? You're not okay. You don't feel okay. You don't feel seen. Your voice needs to be heard. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "The secret of creating peace is that when you listen to another person, you have only one purpose: to offer him an opportunity to empty his heart." I developed this chart some time ago, a couple years ago, in the last couple of years, emphasizing this idea that the success of an exchange of difficult emotions often relies heavily on the listener or the receiver. And instead of being the communication skills police, which a lot of people go to when their partner is sharing something upsetting for them, they say things like, you didn't say it in an I feel statement. You used a you statement. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. But I think that we would be better served to say, I can't hear that right now. If I'm being asked to contain, if I'm being asked to be the bigger person in that moment, that means I'm being called on to access capacities and resources, psychologically speaking. So we might be at no capacity. My wife very commonly, before she shares anything, even if it's not about me, if it's about something going on in her life or with the children or with one of her clients, she'll say to me, do you have the capacity? I'll finish this broadcast in a few minutes, and she'll be down there waiting for me. And if she has something on her mind, she might say to me, do you need some time? I have something I want to share with you. And I have the responsibility to say, not right now. I need a break. I need some time. But I don't want to do that because I need to be good. Because if I'm just good at work, if I'm just doing it for my therapist, I'm a bad husband. I'm a bad father. So I don't want to ever admit that I have no capacity. right? That's the wound. It's so hard for people to say, I can't hear you. They want to make the sender, the talker, responsible for the failure. So then I have 5 levels of what I call listening capacity. Number 1 is just keeping your mouth shut. Most of the time, my wife and I, when we're listening to something difficult, we're just demonstrating a 1, silence. Just keeping our mouth closed and listening, saying nothing. Sometimes I have to remind myself, just listen, don't say anything. And I think I have these wonderful analogies and stories and descriptions and counters to her points, but I have to remind myself, just listen. Level 2 is minimal encouragers. Saying things like, got it, yes, nodding, good eye contact, right? A little bit more engaged, a little more capacity. Level 3 is reflective listening, reflecting back what the other person is for clarification's sake. Level 4 is empathy. Phrases like, I understand, that makes sense, I can relate. And then level 5, the highest level, is accountability. I'm sorry, you're right, I did do that. If you are in the position of listening or you are hoping to connect to the other person, try to avoid coaching the other person on communication skills. See if you can listen to what they are saying, the energy that they're sharing. Listen to the energy. As Emma Reedy June explains, I don't coach communication skills often because it is the energy that is exchanged between two people. Some might have very clear mastery of the skills and communicate judgment, criticism, or derision through their energy. And others may have little to no mastery of communication skills and still be able to communicate a deep need to be seen and to be connected. I try to teach people, she says, to listen to the energy. Somebody wrote, if you care about a person, ask them questions. Get curious. If you can't be curious, that means your capacity is limited. If you can't be curious, you're at a 0, and it might be time for you to take a nap, to take a walk, to feed yourself, to rest. Get curious. Move beyond the surface level. Move beyond the surface level conversations and really inquire. And then actually listen, not to respond, but to understand. Pay attention, be present. This skill is highly underrated. In explaining the difference between the skill and being with people, which is really what I'm talking about tonight, I share this story. In a staff meeting, I was pondering these tools, these 8 tools. And one of the staff asked about my suggestion that simply confronting people's defenses often leads to refortification of the defense. Telling a client, for example, or your partner or your child, you're justifying or you're in denial can actually provoke the defense. The staff member then asked me, isn't challenging them helpful for their growth? Explaining how confronting the defense can serve to reinforce them or drive the underlying injury further underground only to reappear somewhere else in the other form, I advised the staff member, saying, be with them so that they feel safe enough to let down the wall. I don't confront justifying when I'm talking to my clients, but clients justify less and less with me over time because they realize they don't need to. I pointed to a poster on the wall in our staff room during this discussion where there was the list of the 8 tools that I've been speaking about hung on the wall. And I said, those skills don't make you enlightened, but if you were enlightened, this is how it would look. This is how you would talk and relate to the other people in your life. It is a way of being with the other person that makes the difference in the relationship. We can learn to listen to the exaggerations, to the mistruths in somebody else's share. I wrote in The Journey of the Heroic Parent, if a child exaggerates when telling a story related to his feelings, let him. You'd be surprised how often children eventually tone down their initial stories once they feel as if they've been heard and their feelings are validated. The reason that people exaggerate in the first place is because they don't expect to be heard. So they have to make the story even worse in just the hopes that their feelings will be validated. Instead of focusing on what the other person is saying, being right or said perfectly within the skills. Learn to hear what is beneath the words. We share I feel statements to communicate ownership, to find a greater connection to ourselves, to get clear. We also do it to connect to others, to hear and to understand the other person, and to hear and be understood. And these skills work on their own. Intrapsychic differentiation, which is what I've been talking about, knowing the various aspects and energies and parts of ourselves and how they relate to each other. Intrapsychic differentiation is the ability to distinguish between what is observed and what is thought and what is felt. It is the beginning of connection, because without this awareness, we may experience our internal world, thoughts and feelings, as something that is happening outside of us. In this way, we lose agency and there is no path forward. We are left with the notion that the cure to our distress is to control the outside world. This is the genesis of enmeshment or fusion with the other person. And in this state, this way of being, connection is lost. James Hollis explains that this idea of individuating, which is similar to differentiating, he said it's been confused with overindulgence, with self-indulgence, or mere individualism. But what individuation more often asks of us is the surrender of the ego's agenda. That is the energy to be good. The ego's agenda of security and emotional reinforcement in favor of humbling service to the soul. We talk about boundaries, but really the communication skills are the kind of operationalized way of talking about boundaries, of understanding what's going on inside of all of us. Why wouldn't you share feelings? If you're feeling dysregulated and only trying to change the other person's behavior, trying to guilt and shame the other person, make them responsible for your feelings. If you're trying to make your point and get agreement, if you're using it to manipulate, defend, discount, dismiss, or if you're just waiting to respond. The goal of communication theory is to learn to be with another person, to be with yourself first. And we use it not to set up walls with other people, not to hurt them or push them away, but we use them to build bridges for connection. And it takes, this stuff is so hard, you guys. This is so hard. And most of the experts that you read and that you put on a pedestal, I include myself in all of this, we struggle with it also. The skills themselves won't be good enough. They're not enough. We have to do some of the deeper work. And these skills can work if only one person is participating. You don't need another person to practice the I feel statement. We can learn to listen to what other people are not saying. We can learn enough about ourselves to realize that what other people think and feel about us is not necessarily about us. But that's a tall, tall order. Listen, listen, and listen. And in the end, none of us are as good as we think at listening. All right, folks. Like I mentioned, the next Finding You workshop, which I strongly recommend, is April 23rd through 27th. There may be a spot left. May 16th, there's an online version. June 4th is after that. I'll be teaching the Conscious Parenting Workshop in the Bay Area, May 10th, 9 a.m. to 4 Pacific time. And in person, online, May 19th, 9 to 4 Mountain time. If you want to do a Finding You and you want to do it with your spouse, or if you've done one and you want to include your spouse, the Finding Connection Workshop for couples will be hosted by me and my wife, Michelle, on June 18th through 22nd. For private intensives for couples, families, or individuals, contact us at info@findingyouprograms.com. That's info@findingyouprograms.com. If you want to attend the 5-day workshop at a beautiful retreat center in New York, go to eomega.org, look at the workshops, and sign up for the Audacity to Be You workshop, October 12th through 17th later this year. Relatively cheap for a 5-day workshop. Around $500 for a 5-day workshop with me. And coming soon will be our Finding You Inner Circle. That'll be $10 a month or $100 a year, which is a subscription for content that you won't get for the public, couple of broadcasts a month, and access to these live broadcasts. If you are a Finding You alumni, you'll be automatically enrolled. If not, we're asking for $10 a month or $100 a year for that. Contact us at info@findingyouprograms.com to learn more. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. This Thursday, 2 nights from tonight, I'm going to be hosting my first one. We're changing the name of it. It's called Ask Me Anything with Dr. Brad Reedy. So this Thursday night, April 3rd at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, Ask Me Anything. You can send in questions in advance or submit them live. The way you would send them in is to email them to us at info@findingyouprograms.com, info@findingyouprograms.com. Next week, a week from tonight, I'm really excited about this very difficult but very relevant topic, religious trauma. I would say about a third of our clients, a third of my clients, have expressed some significant trauma related to their religious upbringing. So I'll be talking about religion, spirituality, and religious trauma. That'll be next Tuesday, April 8th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. All right, folks. I hope this has been a helpful point of contact. And as always, for and in behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thanks for showing up. Thanks for listening to these. Your work makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you Thursday night. Take care. Bye-bye.